In 1924, at this stage door here, a young American pianist entered it, hoping to seek fame and fortune over here in London's glittering West End. But sadly for him, it actually wasn't this stage door that would be the key, the door opening to his fame and fortune. In fact, some people might say he's now largely forgotten, simply because he could have pursued a bigger dream. But quite frankly, there was another major American star that made sure, at least for some time, his name lived on. As ever, let me explain. Morning, nice to see you today. Thank you so much for joining me. We're outside the stage door of the Victoria Palace Theatre in the very heart of London. Opened in 1912, designed by the brilliant theatre architect. Of course, everybody knows his work, Frank Matcham. He would be the go-to person if you truly did want a wonderful theatre. And it's amazing to think, with all the theatres that they pulled down over the years that apparently were structurally unsound, these are still standing. You just realise, don't you, that it's all about money and wanting to build faceless office blocks in their place. But how many now working in those faceless office blocks fail to realise the many stars that have tread on that stage that they're now walking beneath, perhaps by the photocopier or indeed the coffee machine. This particular building has a very special place in my heart also. I've been lucky enough to appear at the Victoria Palace, erstwhile in the musical Buddy, but we'll leave that there for now. It also, other big claim to fame was way back in 1960 with Sammy Davis Jr., because this was the very first time that the British Royal Variety Command performance was televised. You can find bits of it on YouTube now, and this literally was the door that the Duke and the Queen, the Duke of Edinburgh should I point out, came out after meeting the stars of the day. Incredible history, isn't it, when you tap around? But this particular man, we're talking about Carol Gibbons, right? Way back in 1924, as I say, he was doing the usual rounds as you do, being a theatrical, hoping to make it big. And more so, he was a talented, brilliant pianist. But he hadn't had his break yet. He was still looking for it. Now, you have to think about exactly the genre, the music that was happening. This was the jazz age, the 1920s. It was the height of it. The flappers, the girls, everything was free with gay abandon, different word then. And of course, you have to think that people had come out of the First World War and were looking for fun. The time was right for talented people. Carol Gibbons fitted that type. Now, he decided to rock up to the very famous, luxurious Savoy Hotel. They had a resident band, the Savoy Orpheans, and they were, it's hard to say, but incredibly popular. Bigger, say, than, let's think about it, Taylor Swift today. They sold records, they basically had their own label inside the Savoy, and everybody and anybody went to dance at the Savoy Ballroom, basically to be part of the band. Carol decided he wanted to be a slice of that action, and his dream truly came true. But it was really many years later, after the event of his stint there, that another American superstar made sure that his name lived on forever, even with a royal connection. Carol Gibbons would eventually become the most famous band leader the Savoy ever had. Gibbons led the revamped Savoy Hotel Orpheans in 1931 right through until 1950. And not only that, he then took over as the director of entertainments until his sad demise in 1954. Famous in his own right thanks to his years of broadcasting for the BBC, he had even written his own theme tune, Garden in the Rain, with lyrics by James Drainforth. As I say, it's hard to imagine just how big these superstar band leaders were. Everywhere had them. The Waldorf in London. I'm sure it was the same at the Waldorf Astoria in New York City. No doubt in your part of the world. Band leaders, band singers were the name of the game. Mainly the singers tended to take, behind the scenes. Over here, perhaps, in England, they also had a very prestigious band leader called Jack Hilton, who became something of an impresario, not just that, but also a television early magnate as well, producing many of the Royal Variety performances here at the Victoria Palace, for instance. Now, what happened to Carol Gibbons was this. Obviously, with time, his memory faded. People, yes, they move on, sadly. But then, one regular guest who Carol had befriended many years ago was none other than the singing superstar Frank Sinatra. Frank was a regular guest at the Savoy and really admired Carol's, well, wizardry on the keyboard, but more importantly, his kindness when Frank was at a low ebb, particularly when he came over for his first ever British tour. Things weren't going well, but of course, being Frank, you stay at the Savoy, right? And he liked the kindness that Carol gave him, sometimes rehearsing with him in his suite late into the night, trying to calm his nerves, all of that sort of thing. So in 1962, when Frank Sinatra was back in town, basically making a brand new album all about great songs from Great Britain, he decided to record Gardens in the Rain by Carol Gibbons, track 7 on the album. And the reason being is he said, look, he was so kind to me, so sweet when he didn't need to be. You know, I wasn't that big then, things were taking a turn for the worst, and he just loved the track. Now, this was another real twist of fate, because this was also a wonderful popular track with none other than Her Royal Highness Princess Margaret. So much so that she invited Frank to her Kensington Palace home to perform it, literally live in front of her, of which he undertook, and they became great friends for many years. But it's fascinating to note, isn't it, when you go into somewhere like the Savoy, as I do now, and you mention it to anybody and say, do you know who this man is? No. Well, thankfully, they still have some of his records in the glass cases inside the Savoy. And it's nice to see that his name lives on in some way or form. But really, it's all down to another American to keep Carol Gibbons' name very much alive. And for that, I'm sure so many people are grateful. If you haven't heard the track, do check it out on YouTube. Neil Shawn, Victoria Palace Theatre, stage door, London.